All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in again. This is Queer and Latinx vidcast or interviews. But what we do here today is we're going to talk with a local community member that is queer and Latinx and just explore our stories and our backgrounds and how we came to be where we are today. And today we have a special guest, um, Nick. Nick, nice to meet you. So, Nick, what are your pronouns?
Oh, I just updated my display name. So I use he, him, and they, them. I don't have a preference. I use them interchangeably. So you're good.
Awesome, awesome. All right, Nick. So let's start all the way from the beginning, and yeah, all the way back to where you were born, and how did you end up, in Utah, or if you were born in Utah. Just tell me a bit about a lot about your history.
Okay. Yeah. So I was born in California, Southern California. I am the second oldest of 10 kids. So pretty big family, which, a lot of Latinx families are usually pretty large in size. Um, And yeah, I lived out there until I was about 14. And then I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. Not by myself. As a 14-year-old, that's kind of scary. But um, after my parents split up, I went to go spend some time with my mom for a little bit. And so I did a lot of my growing up, a lot of my learning about like queer culture and just what the gay community was in general. There were drag shows every night. It wasn't like a special event anywhere else. Like it was just something that was constantly happening. So I was introduced to a lot of things as a youth that I never even knew about or had heard of growing up in California. So that was really interesting. My family's like super LDS. So I think that had a lot to do with it, just being super, um, shielded from a lot of things that were considered worldly, if you will. And so, yeah, huge culture shock moving from California, like super Mormon upbringing to, hanging out in Nevada, finishing out high school. A lot of impressionable moments, a really impressionable age. I stayed out there till I was about 22. And then I moved out here. I kind of went back and forth. My family slowly migrated out to Utah. So that's how I found myself out here. And I think in that transition from Vegas to Utah, um, I had already come out as a lesbian, which sounds probably interesting to say. um, and it was, I mean, it wasn't easy. I think even when you have super supportive parents and amazing support system, like coming out can still be a really scary concept
Mhm.
because it's something you have to disclose as though, anything other than the default is bad or something that needs to be said. You can't just be yourself. You have to have these hard and uncomfortable conversations to feel validated. And that was part of it for me. I think now a lot of my family members are just some of my biggest advocates. In fact, I'm more scared about somebody misgendering me or around them than I am just myself because they're about to get it. So I think over time, and it has taken a while, yeah, I have the support that I need. I also have my chosen family. There's a huge queer community, at least in my experience from where I've lived here in Utah, especially in Salt Lake. I think it might be one of the safest places to be, in the state, considering, the climate of everything and, with the elections coming up, there's a lot of heated arguments that you can get, caught in between. But I'm lucky that, I have people that I can talk to about it or people that see me and reach out before I can even think of, you know, reaching out to them. So I'm really lucky in that regard. And also just having support groups and services that I found through local nonprofit organizations has been very helpful. So I really appreciate that, you doing what you do, it exists because it just felt like something I could only dream of. And so when I did find it a few years back, it's really changed my life. So I'd say within the last 6 or 7 years is what that's looked like. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Your story and your journey to where you were brought here today is really um, valuable and interesting. And I want to ask you, so you said you came out as lesbian. Were you born as a female?
So yeah, I realize now that I skipped over that huge, interesting, chunky part of my my story. So yeah, so I was assigned female at birth. And had a really hard time because I wasn't allowed, like, just being gay was just not an option. It just meant that you weren't praying hard enough, you weren't fasting long enough, you weren't donating enough tithing, I wasn't doing enough community service, I wasn't, trusting enough in a higher power. And I slowly learned that I just felt a little bit different. All of those things that I was supposed to be just didn't align at all with what I was feeling here and up here. So it was, yeah, I was kind of by myself a lot. I was always othered, you had boys, girls, and then I was just kind of hanging off by the wayside. Um, I did go through a time where I was, letting my hair grow long, trying to wear makeup, trying to wear more, we'll say provocative clothing that, really fit, the body I was, that I had, that I was growing into. And it just felt really lonely. Like, even though some people applauded that look or encouraged, um, me trying harder, we'll say, that's a nice way of saying it. It just didn't work out. So eventually, yes, when I moved to Las Vegas, I finally came out. I was actually 18. Um, and that's when I came out. I was just like, oh, this is so hard. I can't do it anymore. In fact, my mom, a lot of times, I don't know if this is good or bad, but it's my experience. She'd just be like, are you gay? Like, what is happening here? This is not how, your sister acted, or this is not, anything that I've been used to. And eventually I was just like, oh, let's just have this conversation. So we did. And even after coming out as a lesbian, and I know everybody doesn't get along with every single person they meet, but I still, something wasn't clicking. Even being taken in by the group of lesbians at my high school, because they're the only ones that would talk to me. I didn't really feel like I fit in with them. And I don't know if it's because they were all white and, I was a brown kid or what, but it didn't quite fit. I feel like growing up in Las Vegas, it was a super hypersexual environment. And in high school, people are doing things because they think everybody else is doing it. And I just wasn't a part of that. So it did feel really isolating in that regard as well. And it wasn't until I was about 21 or so, a few years after that, that I felt like, no, there's more going on. I've met so many lesbians that I can absolutely, without a doubt, say that this is not the perfect label for me, if you're into labels. And so in my head, I was already considering, hey, maybe there's an alternative here. I'm definitely part of the LGBTQIAP plus community, but this might not be the right, part of the acronym for me. So I'm trying to think. I think like I said, it's been about 6 or 7 years since I've been transitioning. So if I can recall, it's been about 6 or 7 years that I've been on T. And also disclose that I had top surgery about a year after that. So it's been a while that I've been, able to dress more comfortably, not having to bind excessively because I had a huge, huge chestal region of tissue. And yeah, it's been really great. Finally grew some facial hair. I'm too scared to shave it because I've waited so long to have it. So I'm really lucky that I can, navigate the world now just as a, passing as male, to where, I don't get so scared to go to the restroom. There's still some anxiety, using restrooms in public spaces. I still haven't legally changed my name or gender marker. So even things as easy as going to buy beer at the store or trying to go out, pre-COVID in the before times was still, could be anxiety inducing, which again, most people wouldn't think twice, like about getting carded. Um, so I'd say I'm still more of a homebody than anything, but working at a nonprofit organization myself and doing community outreach has really helped me just kind of like do all this amazing work and connect with people without feeling so vulnerable. Um, because I finally found, where I belong. Like as cheesy as that sounds, I'm not still seeking affirmation anywhere. Like this is it. So I'm really fortunate to be in this place and like I mentioned earlier, have a support team, my actual family and chosen family, to help me navigate those tough spaces that everybody faces in life, but it's no longer about my sexuality or my gender. I'm fortunate enough to feel that I've got that figured out now.
That is very fortunate.
Mhm.
Um, so you mentioned your family. How did they kind of adjust to this this transition?
Um, I mean, I think they still are. When I say my family, like I mentioned, I'm the second oldest of 10 kids.
Mm.
Um, so a lot of them are younger than me. Um, and uh, uh, my parents are both still in the church, so that's really hard. Hard because it's as a child and not having any children of my own. Um, I can't speak from a full experience of that, but I can say that it feels very not like betrayal, but it's kind of like how can you follow this rhetoric that implicitly tries to harm people like me?
Mm.
How can you believe in these principles that not only don't serve me, your family, but intentionally seeks to obliterate or, it just, it's a very interesting fine line to walk. And I want to respect them as individuals and respect their choices as much as I want them to do the same for me. But there's definitely a huge disconnect there. Um, I think we've gotten to a point um, where my mom uses the right name and pronouns, which is really hard to do because she's known me for so long as something else, and I respect that. Um, my other parent, not so much, and I think a lot of it has to do with the huge level of participation that he has in this establishment. So, but my sisters are great. There are six of us that have the same parents from the same marriage, and so we're really close. Like I mentioned earlier, they're some of my biggest advocates. All of my nieces and nephews, my nibblings, if you will. There's 11 of them, and they're all pretty chill. I never had to come out to them. I never had to. It was just, hey, this is what I go by now. This is, and they've all been really great. And I think that just speaks to the fact that, these labels and these physical changes don't really change me as a person. They do, like, mentally and emotionally, I'm in a better place. But I think I'm, again, blessed to have a family that can just, see who I am as a person and just take that for what it is. And I think that's why we're all still so close and, keep in touch as often as we do. Because that didn't change who I was for them. And I'm lucky that they have been understanding enough and have done their own research and have asked enough questions to get to the point where, if somebody asks them or is curious about, hey, didn't your brother used to be your,
Yeah.
like, they're ready to have those conversations. And yeah, I feel very fortunate for that.
Did you help them be ready for those conversations, or did they just prepare themselves?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think just being around each other and um, just talking in general, they can realize like, oh wow, this is really just a physical hormonal change. This
Mhm.
is this is still my, my sibling. This is still so and so, like, it didn't change me in a very scary way that I think is portrayed, like, oh, a lot of folks, and this may be triggering for some, like, oh, you're dead to me. Even the term dead name when referring to our legal or government name, a lot of people experience that where they're ostracized entirely by their family because they're like, oh, you're not the person that I knew. I want nothing to do with you. And so I think just because we're very close in nature, like just naturally, that it just kind of organically occurred that, okay, I'm not going to let anybody say anything bad about them because it's not true. And also, I think they have done their own research. And also being so engrossed in like queer culture just because it's a part of me and it's part of my work and volunteer work that I've done in the past, that it just they see things that I post on social media, or they've read an article, or they've seen something that I've written posted in the media, and it's just kind of like, oh wow, okay, I can see that. And I think it's just a lot less complicated than most people are scared that it will be. um, and I think that's because of a lot of the ways that trans people or gender creative individuals, that aren't necessarily cisgender heteronormative folks, that it's scary, or that it's evil, or that it's ungodly or abominable. And it's there are so many trans people, there are so many gender variant folks out there, that I think it would blow people's minds to realize that they've been living this agenda that we've been trying to push for years and not even realizing it. So I think for my family and my support system, that it's just kind of been like recognizing that I am still who I am and that I am in a better place. And anybody who genuinely cares or loves me wouldn't want anything different, even if the path that I took looks different than their own.